00171. Jacob has a new hobby. Over a month passed by quickly, and it was already the middle of February. The beginning of the year started out with a few minor issues for Theo. The first was the heroics the people from Naruto were doing. Theo wanted to test all the body cameras Tony created, so he gave people like Madara, Guy, and a few others the cameras. They used them while they fought crime in different cities around the US. He did it for a few reasons. First was to test them. The second and main reason was because he was tired of sparring with them. Sure, he needed it, and it was good for his training, but Madara, Guy, Dai, Hashirama, and a few others always wanted to spar with him daily. Sure, some of them wanted to do it to help him train and improve. But Guy, Dai, and Madara just wanted to fight Theo because he was currently the strongest person and could fight them the longest. Theo was also sure Lee and a few other battle junkies would definitely join in on that list too once they each had a body. Was Theo actually the strongest? No, not even close to the strongest. But when it came to chakra and stamina, he was easily the strongest in that regard, which is the main reason they fought with him. That isn't to say they didn't spar with other people, since Madara sparred weekly with Tao. The only reason he didn't fight her more often is because she didn't hold back, and he always got wrecked hard. If he fought with Tao more often, he would be too hurt to spar with Theo. Since broken bones took a day or two to heal properly, and Tao would always leave Madara as a bloody heap on the ground. The first time Theo saw the aftermath of their spar, he secretly apologized in his heart for ever thinking Tao was too rough in his own training. Madara himself found no issue with her training methods and challenged her once a week like clockwork. All that being said, the ninjas who tested the body cameras earned a nickname for themselves. People started calling them the ghosts because they would appear out of nowhere and leave without a trace. The only reason people knew they appeared was criminals would be tied up in front of a police station and video evidence of their crimes were posted on a special website Theo created. It wasn't just everyday theft, robbery, or assault cases either. They would collect video of all kinds of crimes, and a lot of people you wouldn't expect to see started appearing tied up. Business owners and CEOs of a few large companies, congressmen taking bribes along with the people giving them out. Needless to say, a lot of people were getting upset about what was going on and started trying to take down the website that held all the evidence. They even tried to remove it from internet search results and block it with ISP providers, but nothing worked. Theo also added more features to the site during that time to make it easier to search through the information. While normal people were easily convicted with the evidence provided, all of the powerful people used their connections to try and get out of trouble. The key word was try, but it didn't work for most of them, since Theo made sure to shine a light on what was going on. A few were still able to get away from justice, and at that point Theo took justice into his own hands. Depending on the crime committed, Theo would figure out a proper punishment. Most of the people were rich with hidden bank accounts and money hidden in offshore tax havens. So Theo simply took away the money they couldn't file claims against, and then started to target their legitimate assets through other means. It was still ongoing, but it worked, which is all that mattered. As for the people who committed heinous crimes such as murder, Theo always disposed of those types of people and made it look like a suicide, with a note explaining how guilty the person felt about their actions. Sure, people were suspicious that it wasn't actually a suicide, but Theo used an advanced mind control technique, so there was no evidence of foul play. It did cause a lot of issues in certain circles of people and groups. But with no direct evidence, all they could do is grit their teeth and bear it as everything happened. It was only going to get worse as time went on and Theo had access to more and more smart devices. Was it paranoid and very Orwellian? Sure, but Theo didn't care since he knew how people were and would rather weed out problems before they started. He also made sure he was the only person who could access that type of information, and even then he didn't do it himself. He created a few pseudo-AI type programs that combed through data. If it found anything, it would send it to Theo so he could dig through it himself with the help of clones. It probably wasn't the best way to do things, but he barely trusted himself with this type of power and definitely wouldn't trust anyone else with it. As for the other issue he ran into, it had to do with Revival. While the general public praised Revival and the work they did, certain people behind the scenes didn't. They were mostly people who ran or owned pharmaceutical companies and health insurance companies. Revival was cutting into their profit margins, and none of them were happy. While they hadn't publicly done anything, a few of them attempted some stuff behind the scenes. Mostly it was attempts to take down the website, track where it was based, and who owned it. They all ended in failure, but that didn't stop Theo from sending them a message in return. Most of them, he just ruined a few servers and caused them to lose a bit of money. He did make an exception for one of the insurance companies, though. He found they had a nasty history of turning down claims or taking forever to pay out claims. So he took all that information and gave it to a popular law firm famous for class action lawsuits. He also took all the owners' illegal assets and then froze all their legal assets. It was mostly so the shareholders wouldn't be able to do much against the lawsuit. It was just getting started, though, and would take a while to complete. As for Theo's personal life, there was one thing he regretted doing for Christmas. He used his Ezekiel persona to gift Daniel and her family top-of-the-line cell phones. While Theo himself, Millie and Isaac weren't given phones because they were still young. All of the adults were given phones as a Christmas gift, and that turned into a problem for Theo. Jacob, who wasn't super into technology, didn't really care for the phone that much at first. But once he realized it took extremely high-quality photos, well, he went a little overboard with the camera application. "Come on, Theo, you need to smile more," Jacob said as he practically danced around Theo as he took a bunch of pictures trying to get a good angle. Theo glanced up from the engine he was taking apart and asked, "Why?" "Because you look better when you smile." Theo glanced back down at the engine as he said, "I'm not worried about looking good. I'm busy working, unlike someone else who is supposed to be helping me." Jacob let out a sigh as he put his phone away and asked, "Why can't you be cute like your sister and brother?" "Because I'm not cute. I'm handsome." Theo cracked a smile as he looked at Jacob for a moment. Jacob quickly tried to pull out his phone again, but it was already too late and Theo was focused back on the engine by the time it was out. Jacob let out a defeated sigh and put the phone away as he asked, "You little brat, who taught you to be so cheeky?" "You did. Now are you ready to explain what I need to do next?" Jacob picked up a ratchet as he said, "Sure. Since this is a complete rebuild, the next step is to remove the heads. You do that side while I do this one." Theo placed his ratchet on one of the bolts at random and Jacob stopped him as he said, "The bolts need to be removed in a certain order. It's normally the reverse of the tightening sequence, but it depends on the engine." Jacob pointed to each bolt in order as he said, "Since this is a small block, it goes like this." Jacob watched as Theo put his ratchet on the proper bolt and smiled as he said, "Good. Now give it a try." Theo gripped the ratchet and gave it a good tug, but the bolt didn't move at all. After a few tries, he used both hands, and the bolt finally broke free, which caused Jacob to smile as he said, "Good job. I wasn't sure if you would be strong enough to do that yet. These bolts should be torqued to 65 foot-pounds." For the next couple hours, Jacob slowly worked with Theo as he taught him how to properly disassemble the engine. Once they were done, they cleaned up and gathered the others to walk home. On the way home, Jacob took back out his phone and took more pictures of Theo and everyone else. Theo shook his head at his father's antics and wondered just how many of the pictures actually turned out good. Actually, he started to wonder how many photos he took each day. Hopefully, he deleted the bad ones. Otherwise, he would probably run out of space on his phone soon. After they reached home, they were greeted by the delicious smell of something coming from the kitchen. While Jacob tended to be the main cook of the family, Daniel still cooked dinner a couple times a week, and today turned out to be one of those days. As they stepped into the kitchen, Daniel greeted them as she said, "Just in time, we just finished cooking." Millie and Isaac were in the middle of setting the table as Millie excitedly said, "Isaac helped me make dessert." Jacob started to take pictures of Millie and Isaac as he asked, "What did you make?" Millie had a massive smile on her face as she said, "A double-layer chocolate cake with a cream cheese frosting between the layers." Isaac nodded along with a smile as Jacob said, "Great job, you two. I bet it will taste great." Jacob took a few more pictures and even had Millie and Isaac show off their cake to get a few pictures of it with them before he finally put his phone away and the family ate dinner. After dinner, Theo changed places with a clone and took off to go check in with Tony and a few other people before he started his training for the night. It was around 2 in the morning when one of his clones popped and he received some important information that made him frown. 00172, the leader behind the hand. Theo was seated at his computer as he went over the information his clone found. His cell phone project just provided him with the first of what would be many people he was looking for. On the screen before him was a picture of an old woman of Asian descent. Along with her pictures was some basic information about her and everything her cell phone recorded. While her legal name was displayed on the screen, Theo knew her by a different name. She was Madame Gao, one of the 5 fingers of the hand. Apparently, she was one of the people who purchased a new cell phone from Tony. She also had a very interesting contact list filled with people Theo would need to look into. Unfortunately, most of those people either didn't have the new type of cell phone with his software installed on it, or in some cases the people didn't have a cell phone at all, and just a landline or a pager. That didn't stop Theo from trying to triangulate their locations and dig up information on each person he could. It took Theo and his clones a few months to basically figure out the hand's organizational structure. There were still some blind spots, and they needed to send people to investigate in person. But through electronic surveillance using cell phones, cameras, computers, and other devices, Theo had a decent idea how they operated. With that in mind, he sent out a handful of ninjas to scout out their bases and properties throughout the world. He also had a few sorcerers help out and scout out places from the mirror dimension. It took over a week of on-the-ground scouting before something was found that surprised even Theo. Hidden deep underground, beneath a temple structure in Japan, was a demon. It was apparently a demon that helped control the hand from behind the scenes. Or at least that's what it seemed like, since they only sent shadow clones to gather information. It was a precaution Theo used in case someone became trapped and couldn't get out. They could just dispel instead. It was also harder to detect shadow clones, which was an added bonus, and helped immensely with the demon they discovered. As soon as the clone found the demon, it dispelled itself, and Theo went to Tao for advice. Tao was seated in the library area of Theo's training room at the time, reading a book. Right after Theo received the information from his clone, he stopped his training in Ninjutsu and urgently moved towards Tao. Once he was close, he said, "Master, one of my clones found a demon in Japan." Tao glanced up from her book as she asked, "Was it detected by it?" "It's possible, but it was a shadow clone without a soul, and the clone dispelled as soon as it found the demon." Tao placed her book down and stood up as she said, "Then let's go see what we are up against." Theo immediately hinged into Ezekiel before he opened a portal to a mountaintop in Japan. It was a little chilly on top of the snow-covered mountain, even with the late afternoon sun high overhead. About 5 miles away and nestled in the shade of the valley below was a beautiful but eerie-looking temple. The temple was like most others found throughout Japan, and even the buildings looked well-maintained compared to most. But the vegetation inside the temple grounds and around the surrounding area was in the process of decaying. As they stood on the mountain peak and looked at the temple, Ezekiel said, "It's hidden beneath the temple inside a chamber that looks like something straight out of a horror movie." Tao nodded as she raised her hands and started to chant under her breath. Theo watched her movements and felt power slowly surging around her. After a few minutes, the power spiked, and a golden-colored barrier snapped into place around the whole valley below before it disappeared from view. A moment later, Tao opened a portal to the front of the temple and gestured for Ezekiel to go first as she said, "Let's go see what we're dealing with." After they exited the portal, Tao said in a happy tone, "I'll let you take the lead since you could use the experience." Ezekiel glanced towards Tao only to find her missing and asked, "Why do I have a feeling I'm not going to like this?" "You won't," Tao's voice said from everywhere and nowhere at once. Ezekiel unconsciously shivered at her words before he said, "Aren't you supposed to reassure me that you'll protect me and everything will be fine?" After he was met with silence, Ezekiel frowned slightly as he glanced around. After a few moments, he smirked to himself and raised his hands. He spun one arm in a circle as he said, "I'll just go find Agatha to help me out." The portal he attempted to open never appeared and made him frown again. After he attempted to open another portal, Tao's ghostly voice said, "I've sealed the space around the valley. I'm the only person who can enter and exit it." "Fuck language, young man." Tao's ghostly voice rang out in a mocking tone from the surrounding area. Ezekiel glanced towards the temple and let out a groan before he asked, "You're really not going to help me?" "Don't worry, I won't let you die. That's what I'm worried about," Ezekiel said as he began to stretch his arms. Ezekiel crouched down after a few moments with his hands on his knees and started to warm up his body as Tao's ghostly voice asked, "What are you doing?" "Warming up my body and getting ready for a tough fight." Tao's voice held a bit of annoyance as she said, "You're just trying to waste time. That's not even your real body." Ezekiel continued stretching and let out a huff as he said, "I'll have you know, This is still stretching and loosening up the muscles of my real body. You should be preparing spells to fight the demon with, Tao said after a few moments. As Ezekiel continued to warm up his body, he said matter-of-factly, I'm a ninja first and sorcerer second. Besides, I've yet to read any of the demon subjugation books or related materials. A subject I told you to learn about. Ezekiel finally finished, stood up straight again, and bounced on the balls of his feet as he said, and I told you I would get to it later, after I finished my other areas of study. Besides, we created a team to fight this kind of thing. They should definitely be here instead of me. You could use the experience, so quit complaining, you baby. Ezekiel ignored the comment as he pulled out a few weapons from his storage scroll and placed them for ease of use around his body before he steadied his gaze on the temple doors. After a few more moments of hesitation, Ezekiel moved towards the doors with a nervous smirk on his face. As he reached the doors, he took a deep breath before he opened them up. The inside was dark and gloomy with no light to be seen. The sun didn't help much with the temple being in the bottom of the valley surrounded by mountains. Instead of casting a continual light spell, Ezekiel pulled out a special UV-rated light and hooked it to the front of his vest. It was set as an unfocused beam, so it easily lit up the area around him. As he moved into the temple and headed towards the hidden room inside the basement, which led deep underground, Tao said, You should cast a light spell and a shield. If I do that, the demon will realize I know magic. You'll need magic in order to defeat it, Tao said as Ezekiel went towards a wall and pushed on a brick to open up the hidden room. As the wall opened up, a stench hit Ezekiel in the face like a physical punch. As the scent of rotten flesh, decay, and other unpleasant odors assaulted Ezekiel, he stepped back before he was forced to run out of the basement. Once he was back upstairs, he fell to his knees and puked up his dinner all over the temple floor. Tao's mocking voice rang out around him as she said, Magic would have prevented that. Ezekiel didn't respond as he proceeded to cast 3 spells once he felt better. 2 of them were to clean up himself and his vomit, while the last spell filtered the air he would breathe. Once he felt completely fine, he headed back into the basement as he said, You're right, and I plan to use magic if my own skills aren't effective against it. But I have nothing that can filter that stench. Tao went quiet as Ezekiel entered into the tunnel leading deeper underground with a slight curve to the left. He walked slowly as he scanned the area ahead of him in case his clone missed anything along the slightly spiraled pathway. After half an hour or so, the tunnel ended, and a large chamber opened up before Ezekiel. It was dimly lit by torches hung on the walls and a few braziers arranged around the room. Most of the floor was covered in gore with hundreds of corpses in different states of decay. At the other end of the chamber, seated on a raised platform, was the demon. The creature was overly large, comically so, with its massive midsection on full display. Honestly, if it wasn't for the charcoal-colored skin, long rail-thin legs, and massive clawed hands, Ezekiel would have thought he was looking at Jabba the Hutt without a tail from the way it was currently seated. The creature was laid back on the stone seat and in the process of eating a rotten human leg like it was a chicken wing when it finally noticed Ezekiel. It studied him as it practically sucked most of the meat from the bone. Once the leg was completely picked clean, it tossed the bone into a large pile in the back corner of the room. Someone new? Did the last one finally break? The creature questioned with a disgusting smile as it lifted up 4 human skulls shaped together into a cup before it drank its contents. Ezekiel shrugged as he said, No idea. What Ezekiel could only assume was blood, spilled out of the creature's mouth and onto its exposed stomach as it sloppily finished its drink. Afterwards, it let out a satisfied belch before it said, Pity. I like it best when they break in front of me. It adds to the flavor, though the fact you haven't tried to run away yet is a good sign. Maybe you'll last longer than the others. The strong-willed ones always taste the best. After it set its cup down, the creature watched Ezekiel for a while as it waited for him to do something. As time slowly passed, it frowned, and after almost a minute, the creature finally snarled, Are you just going to keep standing there? Did those fools I have running the hand not teach you anything? No, not really. Just where to find you. The creature slammed its fist down on its stone chair as it said, For your sake, you better have brought this month's sacrifices. Sacrifices? Ezekiel asked. The demon slowly stood up from its seat as it said in a menacing tone, That's your only job, to collect sacrifices and bring them to me. Once it stood up to its full height, Ezekiel could only think one thing. The demon looked a lot like a deranged version of Humpty Dumpty now that it stood up. Ezekiel studied the demon for a moment before he asked, "You really skipped leg day?" The demon's eyes narrowed into slits as it studied Ezekiel for a while before it said, "You're not from the hand." Ezekiel gave a slow golf clap as he said, "Looks like you're almost not as stupid as you look. You insignificant little worm. You dare insult me." The demon growled out before it disappeared from its spot and reappeared in front of Ezekiel as its clawed hand attempted to grab him. A puff of smoke appeared where Ezekiel was, and when it cleared away, the rotten upper half of a body was in its place. The demon squished the body into paste as it turned around to find Ezekiel. Ezekiel stood on top of the demon's seat with a relaxed smile on his face as he said, "You're pretty fast for someone who definitely doesn't do cardio." The demon disappeared again, but this time Ezekiel also moved. In a few moments, over a dozen attacks were traded between the two as they tested each other. Body parts, gore, and other unpleasant things were thrown around the room as they fought in the underground chamber before they finally separated from their probing attacks. The demon licked its lips before it said, "It's been a while since I've eaten one of you mutant cattle." Ezekiel started to move through hand signs as he said, "I'm neither a mutant nor cattle." As Ezekiel sucked in a large amount of air, the demon charged forward again. Ezekiel instantly moved backwards away from the demon as he brought his hands to the front of his mouth as he said, "Katon. Pewpewcachoo." A jet of fire streamed out of his mouth and engulfed the body of the demon a moment later before it started to scream in agony. Ezekiel only held the technique for a few seconds as the temperature skyrocketed in the confined space, and he had no shield in place. He then weaved hand signs together and said, "Futon, de tapa." A portion of the heat dissipated while the smoke, soot, and other stuff in the air was forced out of the chamber. A lot of the gore on the ground was tossed against the far wall, while the demon itself stood out, as it looked like a giant piece of charcoal. Ezekiel studied it for a few moments before he clicked his tongue and said, "Of course it wouldn't be that easy." 00173, the beast. Ezekiel watched the demon that currently looked like a piece of charcoal as it slowly started to heal. Ezekiel estimated it would take 5 minutes or more to heal, and after a moment, he decided not to wait for it to recover properly before he started to pull out explosive tags from his storage seal. The next moment, he disappeared and started to cover the demon with hundreds of explosive tags. It took almost a minute, but once he was done, he placed a time-delayed explosive tag on the demon and took off into the tunnel. Within less than a minute, he burst out of the temple doors and arrived at the edge of the barrier Tao erected. Once there, he touched the barrier with his hand and felt resistance, so he forced Chakra into his fingertips and tested it. His hand stuck to the barrier, so he released the Chakra in his fingers before he applied it to his feet and ran up the barrier. As he ran up the barrier, he counted down in his mind until he hit 10, which is when he turned around and quickly created a magic barrier around himself. A moment later, a low rumble sounded out beneath the temple before it got louder. Within moments, the ground surrounding the temple vibrated and cracked apart before it exploded outwards. The temple and the area around it practically vaporized a few moments later as what could only be described as a nuke went off. The shock wave and debris from the resulting blast slammed into Tao's barrier and Ezekiel's shield for almost half a minute. Afterwards, it slowly calmed down, but the inside of the barrier was completely filled with dust so thick, Ezekiel couldn't see anything past his shield. Was that really necessary? Tao asked in an annoyed tone. Ezekiel shrugged as he asked, "If it worked, does it really matter? You destroyed a historic building for no reason." Ezekiel crossed his arms over his chest as he said, "I did it to kill a demon. You don't kill demons, you seal them or banish them." Ezekiel glanced towards the ground and tried to see through the dust as he said, "Really? I assumed killing them was the best option." Tao's ghostly voice took on a teaching tone as she said, "You can't kill most demons when they are on this plane of existence. Besides, you still need a proper weapon to attempt it, and it's not really guaranteed they will truly die. You need to fight and kill the demon in their home realm to truly kill them. So demons are basically cockroaches on steroids when they're on Earth?" Ezekiel asked as the dust started to settle. There was a long pause before Tao said, "Essentially, yes." They both fell into a comfortable silence as the dust in the air slowly settled down. About 10 minutes later, once it was mostly clear, Ezekiel studied the destruction he caused. The explosion had created a massive crater that went a little below where the hidden chamber was. And the crater itself looked weird since it only went to the edge of the barrier itself. So instead of being in a circular shape, it was actually a square. Ezekiel glanced around the crater for a while before he said, "It looks like that worked to me." "It didn't." "I don't." Ezekiel's voice trailed off as a bleeding gray clawed hand burst from the ground near the center of the crater. Ezekiel narrowed his eyes as the demon pulled itself out of the ground and glanced around before it looked up at Ezekiel. Ezekiel, with his arms crossed over his chest, looked arrogant in the demon's eyes as he stood in the air looking down at it. The demon was in rough shape, but its wounds quickly healed at a visible rate as it stared up at Ezekiel with its murderous gaze. Ezekiel smirked back as he yelled, "It's kind of funny that you called me a worm when you just crawled out of the ground like one. I'm going to kill you." The demon screamed out as it disappeared and slammed into Ezekiel's shield a few moments later. As it pounded against Ezekiel's shield, it said, "Fight me, coward." "All right," Ezekiel said as he kicked off of Tao's barrier towards the demon with all of his strength he could while also being boosted by Chakra. Just before he reached his own shield, Ezekiel released it and slammed both feet into the demon's chest, caving it in. Then they rocketed towards the ground as Ezekiel basically rode the demon like a surfboard. The demon was caught by surprise and had no time to react before they slammed into the earth below them. Ezekiel wasted no time once they landed and pulled out 2 kunai before he jammed them into the eye sockets of the demon. The demon roared in fury as it tried to swipe at Ezekiel, who quickly jumped out of the demon's reach before he landed right on top of his kunai. The blow forced both kunai to go completely into its eye sockets and stab its brain directly. The demon went limp as Ezekiel stepped off its head and stepped back a few feet from the creature. After about a minute, the kunai slowly pushed back out of its eye sockets, and a little after that the demon moved again. It reached towards the kunai still partially buried in its eyes to remove them. Ezekiel jumped into the air as it moved and stomped on its hands at the same time it grabbed the weapons. The kunai disappeared back into its eye sockets again as the demon went limp once more. As Ezekiel stepped off its head, Tao said, "I told you, you can't kill it. That doesn't mean I can't gain some experience fighting with it," Ezekiel said as he removed 2 items from his storage seal. The first item was his tablet, which he typed on for a moment before he slung it over his back. The second item was a beautiful straight blade sword made out of adamantium. It was an item created by one of the blacksmiths from Naruto and worked as a chakra blade. Ezekiel studied the blade as he waited for the demon to heal. It was designed in the shape of traditional Chinese short swords, but had a slightly longer hilt than normal. Inscribed onto both sides of the sword blade was a special Fuinjutsu script designed by the Uzumaki clan for charging weapons with chakra. Movement caught Ezekiel's eye, and he raised the blade in front of himself as the demon started to move again. As the demon stood up from the ground and its eyes began to heal, Ezekiel reached behind himself and tapped the screen on his tablet. A few moments later, the demon tilted its head in different directions as its eyes still healed. A soft electric guitar started to play. The demon turned in the direction of the music and blindly swiped a claw at Ezekiel, who defended with his sword. The blade cut into the demon's hand slightly, but it wasn't enough to cut off the limb. The demon itself roared in pain as it pulled its hand back and at the same time swiped at Ezekiel with its other hand. This time, Ezekiel focused on the sword and charged it with his chakra to form an outer layer on the blade. It was a light, transparent purple color and almost made the sword look like a lightsaber if it wasn't for the blade's shape. As the demon's other hand was about to reach the chakra blade, the song started in full as the singer let out, "All our times have come." The sword sliced completely through the demon's hand with a sizzle sound as the demon let out an agonized scream, and the song continued, "Harry, but now they're gone." Ezekiel pressed forward this time with his own attack and sliced through the demon's still outstretched arm. The blade easily cut through its elbow joint like a hot knife through butter as the next part of the song played. "Seasons don't fear the reaper." The demon's eyes completely healed as Ezekiel swung his sword again and sliced through its belly this time. As the demon roared again in agony, the song continued, "Nor do the wind, the sun, or the rain. The demon attempted to block with its other hand as it waited for its body to heal when Ezekiel attacked again, but his sword just sliced through its other hand as the music played. We can be like they are. The demon's new wounds inflicted by the sword were healing, but at a much slower pace than normal, and it eyed Ezekiel's sword warily as the chorus kicked in. Come on, baby. Don't fear the Reaper. Ezekiel pressed his advantage as he attacked again. The demon attempted to retreat this time, but Ezekiel's main skill was currently his speed, and he disappeared with a body flicker before he appeared again behind the demon. Ezekiel had targeted the demon's overly thin legs and chopped them off at mid-thigh. As the demon let out an agonized scream of pain, its body collapsed to the ground as the chorus played. Baby, take my hand. Don't fear the Reaper. Ezekiel walked towards the demon, who showed a hint of pain on its anger-filled face. All of the wounds inflicted by the sword had yet to really heal, and it was almost completely limbless as it stared up at Ezekiel. As the song continued to play, Ezekiel smirked and said, "Look at you, looking more like a worm by the minute." The demon's eyes flashed with hatred as it snarled. Just wait. I'll get my revenge for this. I'm the beast. A demon summoned from a place you can't even imagine. You stupid human. You have no idea who you've messed with or how powerful I truly am. Really? Ezekiel asked with a smirk. He stepped back and gestured with his free hand for the demon to do something as he said, "Go ahead. Let's see what you can do. Don't worry, I'll wait." La 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 la. Valentine is done. Here, but now they're gone. Ezekiel raised an eyebrow after a few moments and asked, "Performance issues?" The demon wiggled on the ground and gashed its teeth before it snarled. "Just wait. I'll skin you alive as you beg for mercy, you worm." Wow, you really look like a worm right now. Projecting much? Ezekiel asked with a smirk. "I'll kill you. I'll devour your flesh and use your bones as a new throne." Ezekiel stepped forward and casually sliced off the rest of the demon's right arm as he asked, "Are you sure about that?" The demon screamed out as it wiggled on the ground before Ezekiel sliced off its other arm at its shoulder and said, "I was told demons can't die, but I wonder, perhaps I can make you beg for death instead." Fear started to fill the demon's eyes as Ezekiel moved towards what was left of its legs. He sliced through the freshly healed area where a tiny bit of its legs started to regrow, which caused it to scream again as the music continued to play. Ezekiel spent about half an hour as he slowly and methodically carved up the demon like it was a Christmas ham. Once he was bored, he sliced off the demon's head and asked, "Is this good enough, or should I reenact the warehouse scene from Reservoir Dogs once it heals completely?" Tao let out a sigh before she appeared next to Ezekiel and said, "No. I think this is more than enough." "Are you sure? I kind of want to see if I can make it truly beg for death." Tao glanced at Ezekiel as she said, "You really need to see a therapist." Ezekiel shrugged as he said, "I've talked to Inoichi about it a few times. He thinks it has something to do with a bleed-over effect from all the memories I have from everyone in my head." Tao frowned slightly as she said, "Shouldn't you be protected from something like that? The same way my old memories were supposed to be protected from being seen?" Ezekiel asked. "You have a point," Tao said as she watched the demon's head slowly start to regrow. Ezekiel glanced around at all of the pieces he removed from the demon that were withering away and crumbling to dust as he asked, "Is that normal?" "Yes. That's kinda weird. Is it like a golem or something? Does it have a magic core?" "Enhance your eyes with magic," Tao said as she looked at Ezekiel like he was an idiot. Ezekiel weaved a spell together to enhance his eyes before he looked back at the demon and the parts of it scattered around on the ground. As the unattached parts of it broke down and dissolved, they would return to the main body. It was something you could only see with magically enhanced sight, though. Ezekiel, fascinated by what was happening, took his sword and sliced the demon's body into 4 parts. The biggest part turned into the new main body for the other parts, which started to dissolve. After a while, Ezekiel canceled his spell and glanced at Tao as he asked, "Demons have a soul?" "In a sense they do, but only when summoned. All demons need a sacrifice to be summoned to our plane of existence, and the sacrificed soul acts as an anchor for them. That's another reason why they are normally banished or sealed." Ezekiel nodded in understanding as he asked, "Now what?" "Now I'll teach you how to banish a demon back to its realm." 00174. Chakra Aura? With the beast taken care of by Tao, Ezekiel used an earth-based jutsu to fill in the large crater left from the battle. Afterwards, he made a clone to watch over the area as he portaled back to his training room. Since the ninjas and his clones were still investigating the hand, he went back to his training for now. The training he planned to do was something he just added to his routine. It was called Chakra Aura, or better known as Battlefield Presence. An even better term for it would be Killing Intent, but it wasn't used just for that. Flaring your Chakra Aura basically turned you into a lighthouse projecting its light out on a storm-covered night. That light could either focus on a single person or target everyone within its range depending on certain factors. A person skilled in the art of Chakra Aura could even mix in their thoughts or add emotions into their chakra. Want to inspire your comrades mid-battle or possibly create chaos in the enemy ranks? Want to protect your troops from the enemy's Chakra Aura? All you had to do was mix those thoughts and emotions into your Chakra Aura. It was a lot harder to do than just saying it, and it took a ridiculous amount of chakra control to do it properly. But those who mastered the skill could use it as another tool in battle. That's not to say someone couldn't easily brute force the whole thing, but it would lose its effectiveness that way. Sure, it might work on weaker opponents, but it would never work against a strong opponent. While it had its uses on the battlefield to help weaker troops, its main purpose was to let strong opponents find each other in battle and ward off weaker ninja. It was something from the Warring States period that carried forward with the creation of the village system. Did people always use it? Nope. But it was basically an unspoken rule that you flared your chakra aura throughout a battle so weaker opponents wouldn't try to target you by mistake and to attract stronger opponents. As for why Theo just started to learn the skill, the first was his chakra control needed to be at a certain level before it was recommended to learn the skill. Well, he could have learned it, but he would basically have to learn it again once his chakra control was better. The second reason was it was always better to learn from someone who already knew how to properly use the skill. So Theo was currently seated in front of Madara ready for his first lesson on Chakra Aura. Seated next to Theo was Agatha and Tao, who also had enough chakra control to start learning the basics of the skill. They haven't had chakra that long, but they practiced their control with it even more than Theo did. It also helped they've both spent centuries learning to finally control their magic and transferred that experience to chakra, so it took them less time to master. Madara glanced over his students, with his arms crossed over his chest for a few seconds before he flared his chakra aura over them. It slammed into them almost like a physical blow, and they each felt a slight fear towards Madara. Once Madara stopped channeling his aura, he said, "As you can see, your chakra aura can be powerful depending on a few things. The first and most important is how much control you have over your chakra. Shouldn't the amount of chakra you have be more important, since your chakra aura depends on your chakra itself?" Agatha asked. Madara shook his head as he said, while some clans and bloodlines were known for having massive amounts of chakra, most people had a certain average amount depending on a few factors and training. It's why civilian ninjas existed and could even rival clan ninjas with proper training. Madara said with a mocking smile. Madara lifted up a hand and pushed out some chakra into one of his fingertips as he said, "Chakra control is the most important factor because without it, you won't be able to control your aura." His fingertip became engulfed in a flood of chakra and was basically out of control, as Madara said. With no control, your chakra aura would be like this. No real form or function other than existing. The chakra settled down and wrapped tightly around his finger to form a barely noticeable protective layer, as he said. This is your aura when it's under control. It's tightly controlled and not even noticeable until you activate it. The layer became thicker but stayed under control, as he said. This would be your aura when it's activated. Still under control, but flared out for all to see. So we're going to be covered in an invisible layer of chakra? Isn't that kind of wasteful? Tao asked. The chakra never leaves your body and isn't actually used to activate your aura or keep it maintained. It's why the size of a person's chakra pool doesn't matter so much. Madara stepped closer to a whiteboard that was set up for him to use and took a moment to draw 6 circles in a row. Each circle was bigger than the last, and he marked each one in order. The first and smallest circle was named Untrained. The second was Genin. Next was Chunin, and it was followed by Jonin. The 5th circle was named Kage, and the last and biggest one was named Me. Everyone stared at the circles for a little while before Theo said, "Shouldn't there be another bigger circle named Hashirama?" Madara's eye twitched at the comment before he said, Hashirama and I have about the same size chakra pool. But he still beat you in all of your fights. He only won because he had plot armor. Madara huffed. Theo smirked slightly as he said, I guess you have a slight point. Madara ignored Theo and pointed at the board as he said, we got off topic. The reason I said your chakra pool doesn't matter much is because it only affects how far your aura can reach and how strong it can be. Madara pointed at each circle as he said, as you gain more chakra, the area your aura reaches will expand. The same thing goes for the overall strength of your aura. That makes it sound like your chakra pool is pretty important to your aura. Tao said, not when you consider the fact that you don't have much control over your chakra pool. Sure, if you are diligent and train properly every day, you can increase your chakra to Kage levels in theory. Madara pointed at the Jonin circle as he said, but if you only train half-heartedly, you can easily reach Jonin levels of chakra by the time you are in your mid-20s. Madara turned back to the group as he said, your chakra control on the other hand will determine if you can do this. Theo and the others felt dread for a moment before it disappeared and was replaced with a warm feeling that wrapped around them. That was quickly replaced with a feeling of being watched as Madara said. That is what basic control of your aura is like. Now this is your aura with almost no control. The feelings disappeared and were replaced with an unfamiliar pressure. It didn't affect them so much as make them slightly uncomfortable. It changed and they felt more uncomfortable and a slight hint of fear as Madara said. This is the best someone with no real control can do. Now I'll show you what good control is like. The pressure more than doubled, and Theo felt like a physical weight was pressing down on his body, making it harder to move or even breath. He also started to feel the threat of death hovering over him and unconsciously shivered from it. The feeling and pressure disappeared as Madara said, what you just felt was me with my Genin levels of chakra and my masterful control of my aura. You said your chakra pool doesn't matter and that you don't really use chakra to activate your aura or use it. So what do our auras use if it's not chakra? Agatha asked. Your aura is the chakra pool itself. Then wouldn't your aura get weaker as you battle and use up your chakra? Tao asked. If you have a cup full of water and then dump out the water, you lose the water but still have the cup. Madara shrugged as he said, honestly, I'm just supposed to train you on how to use aura. If you want to get into more details about it, ask someone else who likes to dig into the theory side of things like Tobirama. Madara spent the next few hours as he explained how to activate and manipulate your aura. It was something Theo already knew, but having someone teach you how was a lot easier than using other people's memories. By the time they finished, Theo had a very basic grasp on his chakra aura. It would take him at least a year before he was confident in its usage, and even longer before he mastered it. But it would be a very useful tool to have in the future. The only issue he had with it was if it worked on people without chakra. He knew a good bit about chakra aura and understood it worked through a resonance with other people's chakra. Since they were on Earth and no one had chakra except him and the people he gave bodies to, would their chakra aura even work on normal people? It was something he would need to test soon, and he had a good idea who the test subjects would be. Theo spent the next month training as he waited for his investigation into the hand to be completed. It would have been faster if the hand kept digital records. But being a centuries-old cult, they did almost everything the old way. They were actually worse than Hydra in how outdated some of their system of communication was. Sure, they used phones and computers for a lot of normal communication, but that was still in a special code the hand used. The real problem came from their use of carrier pigeons and other birds. They also used sealed scrolls to pass important messages around and keep track of records. Yes, that's right, the hand used scrolls. Not paper or digital messages, but scrolls that they actually made themselves. They actually had a small team of people, and that was their only job in the hand, to create scrolls they could use to send information. It was like they were still living in the past, over 1,000 years ago. Needless to say, it was a time-consuming problem to dig through all of their information and collect it. 00175, making a plan for the hand. It was about a month later when Theo finished collecting all the information he could from the hand. He spent another month going through it all and digitizing it so it would be easier to share with his group. Once he was finished, he called a meeting to discuss what to do with the rest of the council. Ezekiel showed up to the meeting early and took his seat at the middle of the table. The main meeting room was expanded over the past year to fit more people and make it easier to talk at the same time. Ezekiel's spot was placed in the middle, while everyone else was fanned out around him in 3 layers, shaped in half circles. Each layer was placed slightly above the next so everyone could see clearly. Since there were so many people on the council now, it was a little hard to talk with everyone at once. So each seat had a microphone, and when they would talk, a small image of them would appear on the main screen. Each seat also included a built-in computer, so people could browse through the information easier during the meeting. As Ezekiel prepared for the meeting, people started to trickle into the meeting room. The original people like Fury, Peggy, Steve, Hank, and others arrived first, with Tao, Agatha, Bill, Jarvis, and others not far behind. It took about half an hour before the room was completely filled up with people along with the recently added members to the council, which included Minato, Tobirama, Shikakanara, and some other ninjas. All told, there were now just over 20 people on the council with room to fit up to 50 total. It was already a slight issue having so many people in the meetings and would only get worse once it was completely filled. But it was good to have a wide range of viewpoints so that better ideas and solutions could be figured out. Once everyone was settled in, Ezekiel brought up a picture on the main screen of a dried, bloody hand print on an old piece of paper as he asked, "Before we start, does anyone know what this symbol is?" "A bloody handprint," Jarvis asked. "It's the symbol for an ancient ninja cult called the Hand." Minato said, "Ninjas? Like what you're training us in?" Jarvis asked. "For the traditional aspects like stealth and concealment or moving silently. They're passable, but that's about it. They have nothing else that's worth mentioning." Tobirama said. Ezekiel glanced around the room as he said, "You can think of the Hand kind of like Hydra, except they don't want to take over the world. Their original purpose was lost 500 years once they started following a summoned demon called the Beast." Ezekiel pulled up more information on them as he said, "They used to be consumed with gaining power and influence while they pursued immortality. They still do those things, but working under the Beast, it influenced the clan towards nihilism and annihilation. They now wish to see the world burn as their ultimate goal." Ezekiel said as he pulled up some more information on the group. "I've already taken care of the Beast with the help of Tao, and I've had people investigate the inner workings of the Hand for almost 2 months. We now have their complete structure mapped out and a complete list of all members, bases, and properties. If you gathered all of their information in 2 months, why haven't you collected everything on Hydra yet?" Steve asked. Ezekiel glanced towards Steve as he said, "Because Hydra is too cautious and no one person has much information about who is who. Even Alexander Pierce, who is the nominal leader for Hydra, only has information about the people in S.H.I.E.L.D. As for any bases and people outside of S.H.I.E.L.D., we have almost no information." A picture of an old Asian woman appeared on the screen as Ezekiel said, "This is one of the leaders of the Hand. Through her alone, I was able to discover all the other leaders. They don't compartmentalize any information, and the only reason it took so long to collect is because most of it was stored on paper." Fury was still going through the information when he said, "I can't believe they flew under S.H.I.E.L.D.'s radar. This organization is massive." A few others nodded in agreement before Ezekiel said, "Well, we know about them now, and we've already dealt them a heavy blow by removing the Beast. The next question is, what should we do with them?" Melina, who was going through the files on each of the leaders, said, "If even half of this stuff is true, we should probably just kill them all. Maybe for some of the members, but it looks like most people are indoctrinated and practically brainwashed from a young age. I think we should try to help them out," Bucky said as he was reading through some of the files on how the Hand works. Steve nodded in agreement along with a few others before the group started to discuss options on what should be done for the Hand and its members. Once they had a few decent ideas in place, Ezekiel brought up a new picture on the main screen of a grizzled old man wearing a green army hat and blacked-out glasses. Ezekiel waited a moment before he said, "Since we are dealing with the Hand, we should also track down the Chaste." A few more pictures appeared on the screen as Ezekiel said, "The Chaste aren't evil, and their only goal is to rid the world of the Hand. Since we are doing their job for them, we should at least let them know once it's finished. We don't want them randomly attacking people who are no longer part of the Hand." The total meeting took almost 4 hours before it was concluded, but they now had a solid plan in place on how they would deal with the Hand and the aftermath. After the meeting, Ezekiel portaled out of the base to get food before he went to Tony's. The portal opened up into Tony's lab, where he found Tony hunched over a keyboard as he typed away. Ezekiel silently walked up behind Tony and studied the screen for a few moments before he said, "Your code is terrible." Tony literally jumped out of his seat as he turned around to see Ezekiel's smirking face. Tony punched Ezekiel's shoulder as he said, "What the hell, man? Why can't you just announce yourself like a normal person?" Ezekiel shrugged with the smirk still plastered on his face as he said, "I can't help it. I'm a ninja." "Welcome, Ezekiel. I've just informed Happy of your arrival." Tony frowned as he said, "And now you greet him. It almost feels like you like him more than me, Jarvis." "That's physically impossible, sir. I don't have feelings because I'm not human. But if I was, Ezekiel is arguably the better person to be friends with." Jarvis replied with a chipper tone of voice. Ezekiel burst into laughter while Tony looked like he wanted to punch someone. A moment later, Happy charged into the room with his gun drawn. His voice loud, but slowly dropped in volume as he took in the room. "You better not have hurt Tony, or so." Happy turned to glare at one of the cameras as he said, "Jarvis, you told me an intruder broke into the house." "That is correct, sir. Ezekiel was not invited today and entered the house through means other than the front door. That makes him by definition an intruder." Happy holstered his weapon and looked at Ezekiel as he said, "First you mess with me, and now Jarvis is doing it too." Tony smiled as he said, "Look on the bright side. It's keeping you on your toes." Tony then rubbed a fake tear from his eye as he said, "And it's nice to know you care so much." Ezekiel chuckled as he started to pull out food from a storage seal as he said, "I brought food because I figured Tony forgot to eat again." "I didn't forget. I knew you would show up with food, so I planned ahead," Tony said as he started to up the boxes of Chinese food. "Sure you did," Ezekiel said as he finished pulling out the rest of the food. Once finished, he grabbed a root beer from Tony's fridge as he asked Happy, "How are things going with Anna?" "Great. We went on a quick weekend trip not long ago while she was in between movie shoots. Once her movie wraps up, we have a 2-week-long trip to Japan scheduled," Happy said with a smile. "Nice. I'm glad everything is working out for you both. Unlike some other people," Ezekiel said as he glanced at Tony. Tony looked up from stuffing an egg roll in his mouth before he paused, pulled it out, and said, "Don't look at me like that. I've already cut back on drinking and haven't slept with a woman in like 8 months. That explains why there's a lotion bottle next to your computer," Ezekiel said with a smile. "My hands have been dry lately, and the lotion helps." "Really? Should I ask Jarvis about your browser history?" Ezekiel said in a joking tone. "Mr. Stark locks me out of his lab randomly for about half an hour each day, and his browser history is cleared when I am allowed back in," Jarvis said. Tony buried his face in his hands as Ezekiel and Happy burst into laughter. After a few moments, Ezekiel said, "I'll make sure I text you before I portal over from now on. There are certain things I prefer not to see." Happy gave Tony a pat on the back as he said, "Now I know why you keep doing maintenance on the cameras each day. I hate both of you," Tony said as he grabbed his food and moved back to his desk. As Tony sat down at his desk, Ezekiel said, "Don't worry about it so much. It's natural, and everyone does it." Ezekiel glanced around Tony's workshop for a moment before he added, "But maybe stop doing it in the workshop and take it to your bedroom. I really don't want to touch something weird one day because you forgot to clean up after yourself." Tony did his best to ignore Ezekiel's teasing, but after a few minutes he finally asked, "What brought you by anyway?" "Mostly to check on the current projects and see where you're at with them. I also wanted to see if you and Pepper are finally done acting like awkward teenagers." Ezekiel said, "Nope. If anything, it's getting worse," Happy said before he took a bite of his food. Ezekiel glanced at Tony as he said, "Just kiss her already." "It's not that simple," Tony said with a sigh. Ezekiel glanced at Happy as he said, "Wow, it is getting worse. I honestly didn't think it was possible. Is it Rag on Tony Day and I missed the memo somehow?" Tony asked with a frown. "No, Mr. Stark. The memo is currently in your unread email," Jarvis said. "Don't you start again too. Maybe we should stop before we make him cry," Ezekiel said as he looked at Happy. Happy nodded as he said, "It's probably for the best. If he does cry, I could upload the footage to Vibe labeled, 'Billionaire Cries After Being Bullied.' I am sure it will be a hit." Tony flipped them both off and one of the cameras as he said, "I hate all of you. 00176. dismantling the hand in 3 easy steps. To say the leaders of the hand were in crisis mode would be an understatement. While they could easily run everything and have done so for centuries, it didn't mean they had no crisis going on. The beast and its temple disappeared from the face of the earth like it never existed. When more sacrifices were being brought to it a week ago, the person in charge discovered the temple missing. Since no one was in charge of watching the temple, they had no idea what happened or when. What made matters worse was they dug up the area where the temple used to be and found nothing. The hidden chamber that used to be almost 60 feet underground was completely gone too. Because of the temple and the beast missing, all the upper management of the hand was now gathered in Japan as they attempted to figure out what happened. It was rare for all the fingers to be in one place at the same time, but it wasn't unheard of. Madame Gao was seated in the living room of a mansion hidden in the countryside of Japan, about 30 miles from the closest city. It was only a few miles away from where the temple used to be and was the staging area for the sacrifices. Now it acted as a temporary headquarters for the leaders of the hand, while they worked on solving the mystery of the beast and the temple just disappearing. As Gao and the other leaders were in the middle of a meeting, they each suddenly felt the cold touch of metal against their necks and immediately stopped talking. A few moments later, a man's voice carried throughout the room as he said, "I'm glad I have your undivided attention." After a few moments, a man stepped into view for Gao and a few others as he took a seat at one of the empty chairs around the table. He made a gesture with one hand before the blade was pulled away from Gao and the others' throats. He then smiled at everyone as he said, "Who knew getting rid of the beast would make our job easier?" After Ezekiel spoke, everyone in the room focused on him, and after a moment Murakami asked, "What do you mean you got rid of the beast?" Ezekiel glanced at the man who spoke as he said, "He was banished back to his home dimension." Murakami and a few others looked concerned as the rest of the group showed no emotion at all. After a few moments, Gao asked, "Are you part of the chase?" Ezekiel chuckled a little before he said, "No." Most of the people seemed to relax a tiny bit at that news before Gao asked, "May I ask what exactly your job is, since it seems to be about us?" "I'm here to take over and dismantle the hand." A scared, ebony-skinned man with an accent slammed a fist on the table as he snarled, "Who do you think you are? Do you really think you can scare us with your little display? That it gives you some type of power over us?" Ezekiel smiled in a predatory fashion as he said, "It did, or all of you wouldn't have stopped talking the moment I did it." Gao and the others felt a pressure crash down on them, which caused their breath to catch in their throats. Each of them started to shiver as fear overwhelmed them, and Ezekiel said, "The only reason you aren't dead yet is because some of you might be useful." The fear and pressure disappeared just as quickly as it appeared, and once Gao recovered, she asked in a shaky voice, "What do you want us to do?" Most people stayed focused on Ezekiel, but a few others turned to look at Gao with hints of anger. Ezekiel studied Gao for a moment before he said, "Help me take over the hand. While we could easily do it ourselves, I would prefer it if we did this with the least amount of bloodshed possible." "And what exactly do we get out of this?" a woman asked. Ezekiel turned to the woman who looked a lot like Sigourney Weaver as he said, "A stay of execution mostly, but maybe a chance to live if you're lucky." Everyone had a mix of reactions to the news, and one person slowly moved for a weapon they had hidden. Before the man could even grab it, he collapsed onto the table unconscious. Ezekiel glanced at everyone as he said, "Anyone else feel like reaching for their weapons?" When no one responded, Ezekiel let out a sigh as he said, "And here I thought you guys would be more fun. Then again, you guys care more about immortality than anything else." Ezekiel leaned back into his chair, and after about a minute of no one talking, he said, "Here's what is going to happen. Each of you will receive a group of helpers. You will help them with what they ask of you, and you live longer. You do a good job, and you can get rewarded." A deep fear settled over the group as Ezekiel said, "Try anything funny, and you'll suffer a fate worse than death." A moment later, Ezekiel stopped flaring his aura and asked, "By the way, do you have any chaste members held prisoner currently?" All the members of the hand turned to look at the ebony-skinned man. He glanced at everyone else with a frown before he nodded as he said, "We caught 2 members a few days ago and are currently interrogating them for information." "Where are they being held?" "In one of our bases," the man said before Ezekiel gave him a flat, unimpressed look. After a few moments, he added, "It's located in Tokyo inside the Midtown Tower on the basement level." Ezekiel lifted one arm and spun it in a circle as he said, "Go get them and bring them here. You have 10 minutes. It would take at least an hour, even if I flew there by helicopter." Ezekiel pointed behind the man as he said, "Use that and hurry up. Clock is ticking." Everyone was so focused on Ezekiel that even people who had line of sight on the portal didn't notice it until he pointed at it. A few people were shocked by its appearance, while the ebony-skinned man quickly jumped out of his seat and went through the portal without a word. After the man took off, Ezekiel pulled out his tablet and typed on it for a few moments before he put it away again. For about 5 minutes, everyone waited quietly before the man came back and helped carry two people who looked like they were half dead through the portal. Once inside the room, the portal snapped closed and Ezekiel opened a new portal. Out of the new portal arrived Tsunade, Shizune, and a few other medics. As they took the two chased members and laid them out on gurneys, Tsunade took care of one person as Shizune handled the other one. The group quickly left through the portal they arrived through without a word before it disappeared. Once they were gone, Ezekiel pointed at a random person and said, "You're up first." Ezekiel opened up a portal next to the man as he said, "Squad 1, you're in charge of him." A group of 5 masked people appeared out of nowhere, and a few moments later they left with their target. Over the next half an hour, the room slowly cleared out until there was only Ezekiel and Madame Gao left in the room. Ezekiel studied her for a moment before he asked, "Have you made contact with someone calling themselves the Kingpin?" "I have not," the older Asian woman said as she shook her head. Ezekiel thought about it for a moment before he asked, "What about the name Fisk?" "I'm sorry, it doesn't ring a bell." Ezekiel nodded slightly before he opened another portal as he said, "Squad 20, you're up." Another group of masked people appeared in the room and after a moment led Gao through a portal. After Ezekiel was left alone, he stood up and exited the room to find a bunch of his team in the process of combining through the minds of all the hand members that were present in the mansion. Ezekiel moved towards Inoichi, who just finished with another person, as he asked, "How's it going so far?" Inoichi pointed to a small number of people and said, "Not as bad as we thought. Only those ones are basically a lost cause, unless you need someone that will follow any order without question, no matter how heinous it might be. Sounds like Danzo would love them." Inoichi nodded in agreement as he said, "It's even more impressive they did that without seals, chakra, and mind techniques." Ezekiel glanced around the area for a few moments before he asked, "How much longer?" "A couple hours or so." Ezekiel opened a portal to the medical research facility as he said, "All right, call me once it's done, and I'll portal your group back home." After Ezekiel left, he headed into the medical section of the base to find out the status of the two chased members. He doubted if they were actually important members, but they could help lead him to other members, which is the only thing that mattered. Ezekiel found Tsunade. Without a hinge on as she worked on her computer, he smiled at her as he asked, "Already finished?" Tsunade glanced up for a moment before she shook her head and said, "Shizune and Sakura are supervising some of the less experienced medics after we stabilize them. They will need at least 3 weeks to a month before they are fully healed." After a few moments of thought, she said, "And it would be best if they were given treatment by a Yamanaka to help them with the torture they endured." Ezekiel nodded before Tsunade said, "Give me $1,000,000. Didn't I give you $1,000,000 last week?" Tsunade crossed her arms under her chest, which did almost nothing since she was in her new body, and said, "It's gone, and I need more." "What do you mean it's gone?" Tsunade huffed before she said, "The stupid casino stole it all." Ezekiel rolled his eyes as he said, "That's literally what they are designed to do. You at least gambled at Tony's, right? Of course, they give me the best comps. Plus, they gave me a luxury suite to use for as long as I want. They only gave that to you because you've spent over $10 million there in the past few months," Ezekiel said as he rubbed the bridge of his nose. Tsunade became more serious as she said, "You gotta spend money to make money. That doesn't even make sense. Do you even know what that means? If I don't gamble big, I won't win big," Tsunade said with a smile. "You," Ezekiel said before he let out a defeated sigh. "So are you going to give me some money or what?" Tsunade asked with her hands on her hips. "Fine. It's not like it's my money anyway," Ezekiel said as he started to create a portal. "In that case, double it." "Hell no. Go steal your own money," Ezekiel said as he reached into the portal and started to pull out stacks of cash. But Grandpa wants to go gamble too, and he needs his own money. I don't want to share. Ezekiel glanced at Tsunade for a moment before he pulled out a little over 3 million in $100 bills. Once he finished and closed the portal, he said, I'll go find Hashirama and see if Tony wants to join us too. Then I'll portal us to his casino. Tsunade smiled widely as she counted the money and started to stuff it all into a small duffel bag while she ignored Ezekiel completely. Ezekiel shook his head at her antics before he headed to the portal room and went off to collect a few people. He not only grabbed Hashirama, but also Madara, who insisted on tagging along. Apparently, he wanted to compete with Hashirama in who could win more money. After they picked up Tsunade, Ezekiel portaled everyone to Tony's house, where they found him talking with Pepper and Happy. Once Ezekiel explained what was going on, Pepper gave a cautious look at Tsunade before she asked to join. Happy also planned to come along since he was Tony's bodyguard, but asked if Ezekiel could pick up Anna to join them. Once their new larger group was ready, Ezekiel portaled everyone to Las Vegas. 00177, a poker game. Come on, land on red, you stupid ball. Tsunade yelled out as she watched the ball spin around the roulette wheel. Ezekiel and the rest of the group were also watching the ball as it slowly came to a stop, and the dealers said, Black 20. Everyone cheered except Tsunade, who gave everyone else a glare as they collected their winnings for betting on black. Ezekiel smiled as he said, Don't blame us for betting opposite what you pick. Tsunade downed her whole drink before she said in an annoyed tone, Why not? You're all clearly doing it on purpose. Hashirama laughed as he put his arm over Tsunade's shoulder and said, It's because we don't want to lose. Tsunade slapped off her grandpa's arm as she said, Let's play something else. How about we play poker, since it's more of a skill-based game instead of being mostly luck-based. We can even set it up in one of the penthouse suites so no one else can join. Tony asked. Ezekiel shrugged as he said, Sounds good to me. I could grab another person or two so we have a full table. Anna leaned against Happy's arm as she said, I don't know how to play poker. Neither do I. Pepper said. Tony smiled as he said, Jarvis, inform the casino manager of what we want to do so it can be set up in the presidential suite. Already done, sir. Jarvis said from Tony's phone. Great. Since that will take a little while, let's head over to the poker room. We'll play some practice games to get you both familiar with the rules while the private room is set up. Ezekiel created a portal as he said, It shouldn't take me long. Give me half an hour at most to find a couple people. I'll come find you in the poker room afterwards. Ezekiel disappeared through the portal a few moments later and ended up at the main base to find a couple people he knew enjoyed playing poker. Steve and Bucky were the top candidates since they had a poker game going once a week at the base. But anyone who was a regular at the game would work. Good thing everyone could use a basic henge now, so hiding who they are would be pretty easy. As Ezekiel headed towards the gym area, a black-haired girl charged at him like a missile as she said, You're here. A moment later, Gabby jumped onto Ezekiel and hugged him as Logan appeared down the hallway from where Gabby came from. Ezekiel returned the hug as Logan stalked down the hallway with his signature gait like he was hunting prey. Once he was close, Gabby released her hug and asked, Did you come by to play with me? Ezekiel shook his head as he said, Not today. I just stopped by because I need a couple people for a poker game. Logan was about to speak when Gabby jumped up and down and asked, OH, I know how to play. Can I come play too? Please, please, please. Ezekiel and Logan both glanced at Gabby as Ezekiel asked, Who taught you how to play poker? Natasha. We play it once or twice a week with a bunch of the other kids. I've even won a couple of times. Gabby said with her head tilted back slightly in a haughty manner. And what did you win? Ezekiel asked, thinking the kids were playing for snacks or candy. It's poker. We always play for money. Ezekiel shared a glance with Logan, who shrugged before he asked, Where did you kids get money to gamble with? Big sis Tsunade gave us some so we could play with her. But she keeps losing, so we all got a bunch of money now. Gabby said with a smile. Big sis Tsunade, you know she's old enough to be your grandma, right? Ezekiel asked. Gabby smiled and rubbed the back of her head as she said, She beat all of us up when we called her old. So we call her big sis now. Ezekiel chuckled before he asked, All right, so who normally plays in these poker games? Gabby took on a thinking pose before she said, Everyone's played at least once or twice. But it's mostly Natasha, big sis Tsunade, and me. Then we just invite other people till we have a full game. Even though we sometimes end up with 2 or 3 groups playing, and we go until we have a winner. Then the top 3 people normally split the prize money. Ezekiel shook his head as he chuckled before he asked Logan, "You feel like playing?" Gabby grabbed his hand and said, "Let's go play together, Dad." Logan glanced at Gabby for a few moments before he said, "You'll have to ask your mom first." "Okay," Gabby said, and started to pull Logan back down the corridor. "I'll be in my lab. Come find me when you're done," Ezekiel said as they left. Ezekiel was in his lab as he checked in with a few of his clones and the status of some current projects he was working on. After 20 minutes or so, he heard the sound of kids talking excitedly. He glanced up just in time to see Gabby, Cecily, Natasha, Laura, Leech, Logan, Yelena, Alexei, Melina, Sky, and Ava enter the room. Ezekiel took a single look at the group before he texted Jarvis, "Have an extra poker table set up and tell me the room number. I'll just portal directly into the room with the others." "Understand, sir. I'll inform Mr. Stark. It's the top floor presidential suite on the West Tower." Gabby bounced over to Ezekiel and gave him puppy dog eyes as she asked, "Can we bring more people?" "You know you're normally supposed to ask before you invite them," Ezekiel said with a slightly disappointed tone. "Sorry, I just told them I was going to play poker and they wanted to join. I couldn't tell them no, they're my friends," Gabby said with her sad puppy dog look at full power. Ezekiel let out an exaggerated sigh before he said, "I'll let it slide this time, but you need to ask for permission before you invite more people next time." "Yes, you're the best," Gabby said as she instantly brightened up and hugged Ezekiel. Ezekiel shook his head lightly before he glanced at everyone else as he said, "Let's head over to the portal room." Once they reached the portal room, Ezekiel created a portal and ushered everyone through it. On the other side, they were greeted by a few casino workers who stared at them for a moment before they continued setting up the poker tables and chairs. The kids quickly scattered to explore the penthouse, while Logan headed over to the fully loaded bar and poured himself a drink. Alexei and Melina quickly joined him to make some drinks themselves. As the workers finished setting up the second table, Tony and his group entered the penthouse. Tony glanced at Logan, Alexei, and Melina before he asked, "Jarvis said you were bringing enough people for 2 games. Where's everyone else at?" "We were just checking out the rest of the place, old man." Tony's right eye twitched as he turned around to see Natasha with her arms crossed over her chest with a smirk on her face. Tony glanced back towards Ezekiel as he asked, "You really invited some little brats to play? Do they even have money or know how to play in the first place?" Ezekiel smiled and shrugged his shoulders as he said, "Only one way to find out. Besides, I'll buy them in." Tony shook his head as he said, "Whatever, I'll gladly take your money." Natasha walked past Tony as she said, "That's my line, old-timer." Tony was about to respond when Gabby burst into the room and said, "Ezekiel, we found a bunch of snacks. They were just out on the table. This place is awesome." Gabby, Ava, and Sky each had their arms full of candy bars, chips, and other things as they rushed into the room with smiles on their faces. Tony glanced at them and let out a sigh as he asked, "Just how many kids did you invite?" Ezekiel patted Tony's shoulder as he said, "Don't worry, this'll be fun." It didn't take long to get everything sorted out and to start both games. While Tony complained a little at the start, he was more concerned about beating Natasha since she was at his table, while Ezekiel ended up sandwiched between Gabby and Leech at the other table. The games progressed until they merged both tables together with Tony, Natasha, Gabby, Logan, Cecily, Tsunade, Alexei, Happy, and Pepper still in the game. Once they did that, everyone took a break to order room service and eat before they started the next portion of the game. Even though half the people were eliminated, everyone stuck around to watch the other half of the game. Ezekiel and the others mostly chatted off to the side as the game wore on, and people were slowly kicked out. Tsunade ended up lasting till only 4 people were left, which included Natasha, Tony, and Gabby. As the next hand was dealt, the betting quickly escalated after the flop before Tsunade's voice rang out. "All in. Call," Natasha said instantly as Gabby and Tony quickly folded. After a quick chip count, Natasha flipped over her cards and said, "2 pair, with pocket aces." Tsunade wore a smug look as she flipped over a pair of kings and said, "Full house." Natasha frowned as Tsunade started to laugh as the cards on the board were a king and 2 tens. The dealer waited a moment before they dealt the next card, which was a 9. Natasha said nothing as Tsunade eyed the chips on the table with greed, already considering them hers. A few moments later, the dealer pulled out the river card and slowly flipped it over. The whole room went quiet as an ace showed up on the board, and the dealer said, "Winner full house. Aces over tens." "Fuck," Tsunade yelled out as she slammed her hands down on the table and broke it. Luckily, the table easily broke apart, so only her spot was damaged and the chips weren't thrown all over the room. Natasha collected her chips with a smile as Tsunade stormed over to the bar and started to drink from a bottle. The rest of the game finished up with Gabby winning against Natasha, while Tony was knocked out a few hands earlier in third place. As for how much Gabby won, it was just over $2 million for first place, which she stuffed into a large pillowcase. When the night was wrapping up and Ezekiel was portaling people back home, he noticed Pepper and Tony talking together on one of the couches as they drank. Instead of interrupting them, he finished sending everyone off before he left himself, which left Tony and Pepper all alone in the penthouse. It was pretty late when Theo finally arrived back home, but he still took a shower before he went to bed for the night. Early the next morning, Theo woke up and, after getting his siblings up, helped prepare breakfast before he went to school. 00178. Grounded? It was a couple days later when Theo appeared in his training room to start his nightly routine for the day when Tao noticed him and asked, "What happened to your face?" "It's just a visual genjutsu," Theo said as he moved to start his workout. "Why did you place a visual genjutsu on your face?" Agatha asked as she tried to get a better look at his face. Theo turned to them so they could fully see his face and what looked like two nasty black eyes as he sighed and said, "I got into a fight at school." Tao raised an eyebrow as she said, "Really? You let some school kid provoke you and got into a fight?" Theo crossed his arms over his chest as he said, "No, it was some older kids and they made Millie cry, so I beat them up. And gave yourself two black eyes in the process." "If I beat their ass without at least getting hit, I thought it would look weird, so I let them hit me a few times. But they didn't hit hard enough and I healed fast, so I was forced to make a genjutsu and fake it," Theo said with a shrug. Tao pointed at her teapot and said, "Make me some more tea, and then I want to hear about this fight." Agatha nodded in agreement as she said, "And bring us some snacks too." Theo let out a sigh as he said, "Yes, master." VVVVV. A few hours ago at Theo's school. Theo didn't go to school every day, but he at least went a couple times a week. While school couldn't teach him much currently, he liked to interact with Millie, Peter, Isaac, and Teresa while at school. As for the other kids, they were kids and acted like it, so Theo didn't really make friends with most of them. Sure, he talked to Jean and MJ and would even play with some of the other kids during recess. But as far as real friends go, Theo didn't really make any. The day started out like any other, and it was a pretty normal school day for Theo up until lunchtime when his sister approached him crying. Theo instantly frowned and gently placed his hand on Millie's shoulder as he asked, "What happened?" Millie tried to talk as she hiccuped and said, "They took Hick. Bun Hick Bun. And Hick. Won't Hick. Give him Hick back." Theo glanced towards where Millie pointed and saw a few older boys with her favorite stuffed bunny. She only brought it because they had a show and tell today, and she wanted to show Bun Bun off to the class. Theo handed the book he was reading to Millie as he said, "Hold this while I go get Bun Bun back for you." Millie took the book in her hands while she nodded her head before Theo walked towards the boys. It didn't take long before Theo reached the three boys and said, "That's not yours, give it back." The boy who had Bun Bun in his hands glanced at Theo as he said, "What are you talking about? This is mine." The other two boys nodded in agreement as Theo said, "You're lying, that's my little sister's bunny, and if you don't give it back, I'll go tell the teacher." The boy who was almost a head taller than Theo mocked him as he said, "Oh, the little baby is going to get the teacher. I'm so scared." Theo shrugged as he said, "You can say whatever you want. You'll still get in trouble, so I don't care." The boy frowned as Theo glanced around for the closest teacher on duty during the lunch recess. Before Theo found a teacher, the boy said, "Fine, have it back." Instead of handing it back directly, the boy gripped Bun Bun with both hands and went to pull it in half. Theo's eyes caught the movement with his active Sharingan and kicked the kid in the nuts. The boy's hands went limp and dropped Bun Bun, which Theo caught as the boy collapsed to the ground as he screamed out in pain. His two friends were caught off guard but quickly went to attack Theo as their friend rolled on the ground and screamed bloody murder. Theo didn't want to drop Bun Bun in case it became damaged, so he placed it in his left hand, which he hid behind himself, and brought up his right hand to defend himself. The first boy swung at him, and instead of dodging, Theo moved into the punch, which connected with his right eye. Theo barely flinched from the punch and returned one of his own to the boy's kidney. The boy let out a grunt as he stumbled back slightly. The other boy threw a punch of his own as a teacher's whistle blew loudly as they rushed over. Theo moved into the new punch and took it in the left eye this time. Right as it landed, he shifted his weight and punched the boy in his armpit. The second boy hissed in pain, and his arm dropped down to hang at his side. Another whistle blew as a different teacher yelled out, "Stop fighting." The first boy didn't listen and attacked Theo again with another punch, which Theo took the punch to the right eye again. As the punch landed, Theo punched out himself and caught the boy in the kidney again, which dropped him to the ground as he groaned in pain. A moment later, a male teacher reached them and said, "I told you to stop." Theo glanced at the man as he said, "I just defended myself." The teacher glanced at the other three boys, one with a limp arm and the other two on the ground. He looked at Theo and said, "Head to the office and wait for me there." Theo nodded as a still crying Millie, Peter, and a few other kids ran up to him. Peter glanced around and asked, "What happened?" "He's in trouble, so don't talk to him," the teacher said as he went to check on the other boys. Theo handed Bun Bun back to Millie as he said, "Here's Bun Bun. You can stop crying now." Millie took Bun Bun and nodded as Theo headed towards the office to wait for the teacher. Before Theo went to the front office, he stopped by the bathroom and placed a Jinjutsu over his eyes to make it look like he was getting a black eye. Within a day or so, he would have two nasty-looking purple-colored black eyes. It took half an hour before the teacher showed up and said, "Stay there for now. I need to make some phone calls, and then I'll take you to the nurse." The teacher disappeared for about 15 minutes before he came back and said, "Follow me." They quickly walked towards the nurse's office where he was checked over and given an ice pack. Once that was done, the teacher led him to a conference room and said, "Just wait here for a little while." Within 20 minutes, the door to the conference room opened, and Daniel walked in, followed by Jacob. Daniel frowned as she saw Theo holding an ice pack to his face and asked, "Why did we get a call that you were fighting?" Theo gave a helpless shrug as he smiled a little bit and said, "Because I was fighting." "Why?" Daniel came around the table to get a better look at Theo's face. "Because some older kids stole Bun Bun from Millie and made her cry." Daniel pulled the ice pack away from Theo's face for a moment as she said, "You should have gone to the teachers instead of fighting with them." "Did you win?" Jacob asked as he glanced at Theo's two black eyes that were starting to form. Daniel shot Jacob a look as Theo said, "I dropped two of them and would have dropped the third if the teacher didn't step in. It doesn't matter if you won. You shouldn't have fought in the first place," Daniel said with a frown as Jacob smiled and gave Theo a thumbs up behind her back. As Daniel checked over Theo, Jacob pulled out his phone and snapped a couple of pictures. After a few minutes, the door opened and the school principal walked in with some paperwork as she said, "Sorry about calling you in for this, but since Theo was the aggressor and injured other students, we had to call you." Daniel turned around to look at the principal as she asked, "Theo was the aggressor?" The principal nodded as she placed some paperwork on the table and said, "The three injured students said he attacked first." Daniel glanced at Theo as she asked, "Is that true?" "I only attacked when he tried to rip Bun Bun's head off." "Bun Bun?" the principal asked in confusion. "It's my little sister's stuffed rabbit those boys stole," Theo said. "And where is it now?" "I gave it to my sister before I came to the office because I wanted her to stop crying," Theo said as he placed the ice pack back over his face. The principal frowned and glanced at the three papers on the table for a moment. Daniel glanced at them herself before she asked, "Did you not ask Theo about what happened?" "No, because the three boys had pretty much the same story," the principal said as she shook her head. Daniel frowned as she said, "You should have done that right after the fight." The principal let out a little sigh before she asked for Theo's side of the story. Once it was finished, she said, "Give me a few minutes. I need to confirm some things." After the principal left the room, Daniel said, "I can believe they didn't even ask you about what happened." Theo shrugged as he said, "It's not a big deal. I saved Bun Bun. That's all that really matters." Daniel shook her head as she said, "You should have just grabbed a teacher first. You didn't need to confront them yourself." Daniel scolded Theo for about 15 minutes before the door opened and Millie walked in with red eyes. When she saw Daniel, she rushed towards her as she said, "Mommy, Bunbun is hurt. Millie showed Bunbun to Daniel, where part of the stitching around its neck was ripped apart and stuffing was coming out. Daniel pulled Millie into a hug as she said, "Don't worry, I'll help you fix Bunbun when we get home." The principal cleared her throat before she said, "While I have confirmed Theo's story, he is still going to be suspended for a week along with the other boys." Daniel glanced at Theo for a moment before she said, "Okay, is there anything else?" "No, you're free to take Theo and Emily home now since the school day is almost over." VVVVV. Tao chuckled when Theo finished his story before she asked, "So you're grounded for the next couple weeks?" Theo shrugged as he said, "Technically, but does it really matter?" Tao nodded in agreement before she took on a feral grin and said, "Since your mom can't really punish you properly, I'll do it in her place." Theo started sweating as he asked, "And how exactly are you going to do that?" Tao stood up and started to stretch as she said, "I think 2 weeks of intense combat training should do the trick. I think I'll be fine without that. Actually, I think I heard my mom calling. I should go see what she wants," Theo said as he started to back away from Tao. Tao appeared in front of him with a body flicker and attempted to punch him in the stomach, which he parried. A moment later thereafter, images slowly disappeared as Tao chased after Theo. A moment later, a thud was heard before Theo flipped through the air and slammed into the wall. Tao appeared in the middle of the training area as she said, "We'll do this 5 hours a night, and then another 5 hours of spell training afterwards for the next 2 weeks." Theo slowly stood up as he said, "Yes, master." "Good, now come attack me." 00179, almost caught. What was supposed to be 2 weeks of intense combat training under Tao turned into over a month. She forced him to not only fight physically, but to also incorporate magic into his attacks and defense as she used him as a punching bag. While that was going on, Theo celebrated his 11th birthday and was finally able to start a new type of training. Since he was now 11, his body could now use training seals and not have any adverse effects. The training seals were something the Uzumaki seal masters created and weren't shared with outsiders normally. Sure, each village had their own very basic version of training seals, but true training seals were way beyond what any other village ever created. The first Uzumaki training seal was based around gravity and had different levels. The gravity affected the person's entire body and made physical training more effective. The levels on the seal went from 1/4 times gravity up to 5 times gravity. Theo already tasked a few seal masters to create an improved version that could go up to 100 times gravity, but that would take a while. The second seal the Uzumaki invented that no one had was a resistance seal. It made your body feel like it was moving through water or mud. It also had different settings and was currently set at level 1 for Theo's training. The resistance seal itself trained a person's speed, since the goal was to be able to move like normal with the seal on and not be aided by chakra. While it was kind of like the gravity seal in making it harder to move, the experience was completely different, and when combined with the gravity seal, made workouts more intense. The last seal was also one that wasn't shared with outsiders and considered a clan secret. It was a seal designed to compress a person's chakra, which helped with 2 things. The first was it helped improve chakra growth, and second, it helped with overall chakra control. With a person's chakra being suppressed by the seal, it caused it to not function normally and made the user struggle to use it properly. Since chakra control is one of the main aspects of Fuinjutsu, this seal was used by all Uzumaki seal masters when they were younger. Those 3 seals were applied to Theo about halfway through his training with Tao and caused some issues the first time he used them. With Theo being suppressed by the seals, it caused him to be beaten senseless by Tao within a few minutes. When Tao finished, she asked, "What happened? Why are you so slow all of a sudden?" Theo was flat on his back with blood pouring out of his nose and a busted lip as he said, "Ashina and Mito activated my training seals today." "Training seals? Wait, you actually put on those gravity seals?" Tao asked with interest. Theo pinched his nose and sat up with his head held back as he said, "Gravity, resistance, and the chakra suppression seals." Tao studied Theo for a few moments before she asked, "How hard are they to take on and off?" "Just infuse chakra onto a fingertip and rub it over the seal," Theo said as he lifted up his shirt to show her the 3 seals placed over his stomach. "And you can adjust them whenever you want." Theo nodded as he said, "Pretty much." Tao walked over to her chair and sat down as she said, Call Ashina over to give me the same seals. And brew me a pot of tea while we wait. Within half an hour, Tao also had the 3 seals placed on her stomach and restarted training with Theo. Since then, both Tao and Theo haven't removed the seals and basically used them to train 24 hours a day. About 2 weeks later, and once Tao was completely satisfied with the training, Theo's school year ended, and it was time for his summer vacation. This year for summer vacation, the family decided on a trip to Florida. Jacob and Ben still had yet to hire anyone new to help out with the expanded shop and new equipment, but they were in the process of looking. Theo's people were already trained and had a lot of practice, so they should be able to get the jobs his dad was looking to fill. But that would only come after his family's vacation was finished. Since they didn't need to worry about any new employees, they decided to shut down the shop again for a few weeks and take everyone like last time. Unlike last time, they rented an RV instead of a passenger van so everyone would be more comfortable. The price was a little more, but they planned to camp at a few places along the way, which saved money over getting motel rooms. The road trip to Florida and the theme parks were pretty uneventful but fun. Well, if you consider being crammed into an RV with over 10 people fun. The plan once they arrived was to spend 1 full week at each of the 2 main theme parks before heading back home. The first theme park they went to went smoothly, and the family had a lot of fun. The second theme park caused some chaos for Theo when some unexpected visitors showed up and almost caused him to be exposed. Theo was seated in a restaurant near the window with his family about to have breakfast when he spotted a black-haired girl he was very familiar with sniffing the air. As soon as he noticed her, he stood up from his seat and said, "I'll be right back." "You gotta poop, Theo?" Millie asked as she glanced up at him. "Millie, don't ask a question like that," Daniel said as she frowned slightly. Millie glanced back at her mom as she asked, "Why not? If he has to poop, he has to poop. What's wrong with asking?" Theo quickly shook his head as he said, "No, but I do need to use the restroom." As Theo walked away, he heard Daniel as she said, "Just ask if he needs to use the restroom next time." Once in the restroom, Theo created a clone and hinged into Ezekiel himself. He then created an invisibility spell around himself before he portaled to the roof of the building. Once there, he looked for his target and found her slowly making her way to the restaurant through the crowd of people. Ezekiel jumped down from the roof and canceled his spell as he walked out into the main thoroughfare of traffic. Within a few moments, a black-haired girl slammed into him as she said, "I knew I smelled you." Ezekiel smiled and patted her head as he asked, "What are you doing here, Gabby?" Gabby smiled up at Ezekiel as she said, "Mom took me and my friends out today." Ezekiel glanced around before he asked, "And where exactly are they at?" Gabby glanced around for a moment before she said, "I don't know. I thought they were behind me." Gabby smiled as she looked up at Ezekiel and said, "It doesn't matter. I can just find them later." Gabby let go of Ezekiel as she asked, "What are you doing here? Did you come to play too?" Ezekiel shook his head slightly as he smiled and said, "A little bit." "Did you come with anyone? Where are they?" Gabby asked as she glanced around. "I'm alone at the moment." Gabby grabbed Ezekiel's hand and started to pull him along as she said, "Great. Then let's go ride some roller coasters. How about we find your mom and friends first?" Ezekiel asked as he cast a quick glance towards the restaurant where he left his clone with his family. Luckily, he noticed Gabby before anything happened, but he could only shudder at the thought if she caught him out in the open with his family. He would probably need to have an umbu detail trail him from now on when out with his family. Ezekiel filled that thought away for later as Gabby slowly pulled him through the crowded park. Within 5 minutes, Gabby found her mom along with her friends, only to get scolded by her mom as she asked, "Gabrielle Kinney, just how many times have I told you not to run off?" Gabby smiled as she rubbed the back of her head and said, "I don't know. A lot maybe. If I've said it a lot, then why don't you listen to me?" Sarah asked with her arms crossed over her chest. Gabby pointed at Ezekiel as she said, "But I found Ezekiel." Sarah let out a tired sigh before she said, "That doesn't justify you not listening to me." Ezekiel nodded in agreement before he placed a hand on Gabby's shoulder and said, "Your mom's right. You should listen to her and not run off all the time." Gabby deflated some as she looked at the ground and said, "Sorry, Mom." Sarah pulled Gabby into a hug as she said, "You don't need to apologize. Just listen to me next time, please." Gabby hugged Sarah back as she said, "Okay." After Sarah released Gabby from their hug, Gabby seemed to bounce back to her normal self and grabbed Ezekiel's hand as she asked, Where did everyone else go? Sarah pointed to the line for one of the attractions as she said, they went to wait in line. Gabby pulled Ezekiel by the hand as she said, come on, let's go join them. Ezekiel didn't move this time and said, how about you go join them, and I'll be there in a few minutes after I chat with your mom. Gabby thought about it for a moment before she said, okay. After Gabby took off to find her friends, Ezekiel turned to Sarah and asked, how many did you bring with you? Sarah let out a sigh as she said, with Gabby and Laura, I brought 16. No one else wanted to help chaperone? Sarah shook her head as she said, everyone was busy, and this was kind of a spur-of-the-moment thing. Ezekiel nodded in understanding before he said, well, I'm here now, so I'll help you out. Go join the kids and tell Gabby I'll join everyone in a little while. I need to go do something really quick. Thanks, that will help out a lot, Sarah said before she headed to meet the kids in line. Ezekiel left the crowded area and once out of sight created a portal to the front of the park near the entrance and went to purchase a VIP tour for Sarah and her group along with one for his family while he was at it. It was expensive and something only rich people would normally do, but he didn't care since it wasn't his money anyways. With the 2 VIP tours paid for, he told the first VIP host where they could find his family, while he led the second one to go meet up with Sarah, Gabby, and the other kids. As they walked through the park, Ezekiel dialed his mom's number and gave her a call. While his mom was on vacation, she told him before she left that she would keep her phone on in case there was some type of emergency. Hello. Hi, Daniel. Sorry to interrupt your vacation, but I wanted to let you know I booked a VIP tour for you and your family. Ezekiel said, you booked us a VIP tour for us? Yeah. Consider it my way of saying thanks for all the great work you do. Anyways, have fun, and I'll talk to you when you get back from vacation. Ezekiel said before he went to hang up the phone. Wait. Daniel glanced at her phone before she let out a sigh and put it away, already used to how Ezekiel acted. Jacob and the rest of the table looked at her for more information, so she said, apparently my boss booked us a VIP tour of the park. I'm not really sure what that is though. As his family finished eating breakfast, Ezekiel and his tour guide arrived to find Gabby and the others still in line, and they weren't even close to the front yet. Ezekiel waved at them as he said, I don't like waiting in line, so I booked a VIP tour for us. Come on, let's go have fun. With the VIP host as their guide, they no longer had to wait and were able to access certain parts of the park that weren't normally open to the general public. They also received a ton of other perks that lasted for their entire vacation at the park, since Ezekiel booked the VIP package for the whole time they were there. 00180, the Hand's new direction. After the family summer vacation, a couple things happened. The first one was Jacob and Ben started looking for new employees to hire. With all the new equipment, it was time to hire people who were skilled with it. They didn't want to mess with the current harmony they had in the shop, so they took their time to find people and interviewed each of them. As for Theo, he ended up having to do a lot of work to make sure the people he wanted had interviews. Sure, they didn't have as much experience as some of the other people Jacob interviewed, but Theo made sure they would be able to work and gel with everyone in the shop. It helped that they were all ninjas and had spy and infiltration training, which helped a lot. They also all had an interest in cars and the type of work they would be doing. It took almost the rest of the summer, but Jacob and Ben finally hired the people they wanted for the shop. Minato and Kushina were hired as paint specialists and could do a lot of really custom artwork and pinstriping. Their skills with Fuinjutsu made some of the work like pinstriping very easy for them to pick up and master after the memories were implanted. Next was metal fabrication, which turned out to be a blacksmith who was famous for making chakra blades. His skills with blacksmithing and the knowledge he gained with the help from Inoichi made him adapt quickly. He was actually one of the most skilled people Jacob ended up hiring and would help save a lot of time when it came to metal work. Sure, he had to learn how to use more modern tools, but a hammer and anvil were still one of the tools used for metal fabrication even in this day and age. The next person who was hired was a Nara clan member. She was pretty lazy like most Nara, but she enjoyed building things and liked computers. Once she discovered CAD and how she could make things without much effort, it was over, and she was hooked. After the experience she gained, some cramming to learn a few things in math and other subjects, she easily passed all tests Jacob had for her. She was mostly in charge of the CNC machines, plasma cutter, and milling machine. She would also use CAD to help mock up designs for projects going forward. A good welder was next on the list, and the person they found was Sasori. While he was new to welding, he was technically an amazing engineer. All the puppets he created and designed throughout his life were hand-made with simple tools. It took a lot of passion and creative engineering to produce his puppets, and he brought that enthusiasm into welding. He also learned CAD and a few other things which made him a great addition to the shop. They followed Sasori up with an upholstery specialist, since they planned to do everything in-house from now on to control quality better. As for the person they hired, it was one of the crafters who was originally a clothing maker for ninjas. They worked with all types of material from cloth to leather and everything the ninja world could produce. Upholstery work for cars would obviously be different from making clothes, but it wasn't a major departure, and they picked it up quickly along with the implanted memories they copied from other upholstery specialists in the industry. The last person they hired was an electrical specialist for wiring and other types of issues. Darui, the person who was supposed to be the fifth Reikage, ended up with the job. While his lightning release wouldn't help him much with work, he actually had a talent for electrical wiring and was interested in cars. With the memories he was granted and practice, he was easily hired after Jacob and Ben gave him a working interview. It was actually something they did for everyone, since they wanted to make sure everyone was skilled in what they said they can do. It also helped that Theo took photos of the practice projects he had everyone work on to gain practical experience and had them use that for a work portfolio. With the shop almost fully staffed near the end of summer and Theo happy that the people he wanted were hired, he focused back on other issues, mainly the dismantling of the hand. The fingers, under watch from Theo and his helpers, systematically dismantled and consolidated the hand into a new group. The problematic members, after some debate, were disposed of since most of them had no morals and did things that weren't redeemable. Sure, they were conditioned to be that way, but they were pretty much broken and beyond saving at that point. The next group of people were the ones that might have killed people before, but still had some humanity left. Theo had Yamanaka clan members help them out and work to deprogram them and save them. Some ended up breaking and Theo was forced to put them down, but most of them were saved. Theo still wanted them to atone for what they did, so he assigned them to work as nameless heroes who would go around fighting crime. They were all skilled fighters, so Theo figured why waste their talents. The last group, and also the largest, was the recruitment organizations spread all over the world. Besides the people who ran them and maybe a helper or two, no one knew what their true purpose was for, since they were mostly designed to bring in wayward kids and find feature members for the hand. Well, Theo kind of kept that the same aspect he added to it. Instead of focusing on just teaching kids how to fight, he expanded the programs and gave them more people to help kids and the communities around them. Sure, they taught martial arts, but now they had programs to help kids study after school. For older kids, they helped them figure out what career path they might want to choose. They would also help teens to prepare for college or find work internships for teens that wanted to go into trades. They set up food and clothing drives for the underprivileged people in their areas and would help people find jobs. The programs also helped older people learn new skills for free so they could get better paying jobs. They also set up homeless shelters with the goal of rehabilitation for anyone who entered. Sure, Theo cheated a little with that and would send a Yamanaka to the shelters to help people with mental issues. But they also worked well to break people from having addiction issues. With those issues fixed, people were given help to get back on their own feet. While not everyone had a good skill set to find a job, Theo made sure that people who came into the shelter system were given the chance to learn one. The shelter system, besides giving each person or family their own place to live while they were there, also taught people how to manage their money and save it properly. For younger people, they were taught other useful skills for living alone, like doing laundry and cooking. Theo's goal was for people to go into the shelter system and come out within a year or two as a healthy and functional member of society who had money and a stable job. The process wasn't completely finished, but Theo was spending all the money the hand made over the years to make it happen. He was also in the process of liquidating all the land, buildings, and other things the hand owned that was no longer needed. Theo figured that by the end of the year, he would have most of it done and the hand would no longer exist as it used to. As for the fingers of the hand, after they finished what he needed them to do, he took them to the medical base and put them on lockdown. Basically, they were placed into a medically induced coma, locked inside what amounted to a tiny prison cell. They weren't the only people in the place. Theo currently had about 20+ people saved here. Normally, he would just kill them and be done with it. But a few of them were saved for certain reasons and plans he had for the future. The only issue Theo had with everything was the Chaste, who were still attempting to fight the old members of the Hand, even though they wouldn't fight and just run away. Theo gave them orders to no longer engage the Chaste and to run if they were attacked. While it worked in practice, the Chaste didn't seem to care and were emboldened to fight even more. So Theo finally stepped in, and he would teleport to any fight the Chaste started and beat them senseless. Afterwards, he would leave a note on them that basically said, "The Hand is under new management. Call me so we can talk. XXXXXXXX." It took about a month before someone finally called and set up a meeting with him. Actually, Theo, currently hinged into Ezekiel, just finished getting ready for the meeting before he created a portal. He stepped through the portal to end up inside an empty warehouse in NYC. It was almost midnight, and the only light in the building was from the half-full moon that shined in through the broken skylights above. Ezekiel glanced around for a moment, and even with his improved eyes, didn't see anyone hidden inside the place. After a few moments, a speaker crackled to life, and someone said, "Neat trick. Is that some kind of innate power?" Ezekiel shrugged as he glanced around and said, "Just a magic trick." A moment later, Ezekiel noticed a camera almost hidden from his view and focused on it as he asked, "Is this how we're going to do this? Or is someone going to show up and talk to me in person?" "You're too dangerous to meet in person, and you're also connected to the Hand. I haven't killed a single member of your little group, and I also saved a couple of them from the Hand right after I took it over," Ezekiel said with a friendly smile. "That doesn't mean you can be trusted. We have been enemies with the Hand for over 500 years, and you are now part of them." Ezekiel let out a sigh before he asked, "So does that mean you don't want to talk? What do you want?" Ezekiel focused on the camera as he said, "I would like you guys to stop harassing the former members of the Hand." "We cannot do that." Ezekiel raised an eyebrow and asked in an annoyed tone, "And why not?" "Because they are the Hand, and we are the Chaste. Our purpose is to destroy the Hand." Ezekiel shook his head as he said, "I already told you, they are no longer the Hand, and under my leadership now." "What about the Five Fingers? Where are they?" "Taken care of after they transferred leadership to me," Ezekiel said with a smirk. "So you're the current leader of the Hand?" Ezekiel nodded slightly as he said, "Yes, after I cleaned house I took over leadership of what was left." "Then that makes things much easier." "Why do you?" Ezekiel didn't get to finish his question as the warehouse around him exploded. The warehouse itself was completely leveled to the ground, and most of the warehouses around it were also destroyed. Car alarms and animals could be heard for several blocks around the area from the noise of the blast, and almost all windows within a certain distance were shattered. Ezekiel, for his part, was perfectly fine as he stood in the fire and rubble of the building. A magical shield flashed around his body as the flames touched it sometimes. Ezekiel glanced around the destroyed warehouse for a moment before he created a portal and disappeared. It looked like he would need to be a little more forceful with the chase going forward.